So we are looking at a stack of documents today that covers a 12-day period in May 1944.
Right, May 1944.
Yeah, and it's this set of naval logs and intelligence reports from Fleet Radio Unit Pacific at Pearl Harbor. And they detail what is effectively the most successful anti-submarine run in history.
The single most successful run, yeah.
But what really struck me reading through this isn't the explosions or the battle tactics. It's how much the whole thing just looks like a math problem.
It really does. I mean, you usually think of naval warfare, especially in the Pacific, as this visceral, chaotic thing.
Right. Planes diving, carriers burning, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But this story, the story of the USS England, is completely different. It's about geometry, it's about physics, and a very specific technological shift that turned submarine hunting from an art form into a science.
And a science that yielded terrifying results. We're talking about a single ship sinking 6 Japanese submarines in 12 days.
Which is incredible.
It's a record that has never been matched.
And honestly, it likely never will be, just given how naval warfare has evolved since then. But to understand why this was such a wild anomaly, we have to look at where the war was in May 1944. The context is really crucial here for you listeners.
Right, the lifelines. I was reading the background on the Japanese garrisons in the Pacific, places like Buin. By 1944, the American blockade is so effective that these islands are literally starving.
Yes.
And the Imperial Japanese Navy is forced to use their fleet submarines, these massive, complex war machines designed to hunt aircraft carriers, basically as underwater delivery trucks.
This is a desperate misuse of assets.
Right.
I mean, you have these high-tech vessels packed with rice and rubber bags of supplies trying to sneak into blockaded islands. And on May 13th, American intelligence at Pearl Harbor intercepts a message.
The trigger for the whole thing.
Exactly. It's about the submarine I-16, scheduling a delivery to Buin.
And that one single intercept kicks off the whole chain of events. A hunter-killer group is dispatched to intercept. You've got 3 destroyer escorts, the USS George, the USS Raby, and the star of our deep dive today, the USS England.
Right.
Now, before we get into the hunt itself, we have to talk about the tools. Because the USS England had an ace up its sleeve that the Japanese just weren't ready for.
The Hedgehog.
The Hedgehog. Which, by the way, sounds like a garden pet, but looking at the schematics in these sources, this thing is a shotgun.
A mortar shotgun is a really great way to describe it. But to appreciate the Hedgehog, you really have to understand why the old way, the traditional depth charge, was so deeply flawed.
Right.
We've all seen the movies, right? The destroyer spots a sub, races over it, and crewmen roll these giant oil drums off the back.
Big splashes, big booms.
Exactly. But the physics of that are a nightmare.
Yeah, I was looking at the sonar limitations in the logs. The sonar points forward, so if you have to drop a charge off the back of your ship, you have to physically drive over the submarine.
Which means you lose sonar contact at the most critical moment.
You're completely blind.
You are blind for the final approach. You're guessing where the sub will be, based on where it was, 30 seconds ago.
And the stats really back that up. The kill rate for depth charges was something abysmal, like 1 in 80 attacks.
Roughly 1 in 80, yes. And it actually gets worse. If you miss with a depth charge, it still explodes.
Oh, right.
And that creates acoustic turbulence, essentially a massive cloud of bubbles and disturbed water.
Which basically acts like a brick wall for the sonar.
Precisely. You take a shot, you miss, and now you've blinded yourself for up to 15 minutes. The sub just slips away while you're waiting for the water to settle.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
It was. But the Hedgehog solved both of these problems. It was mounted on the front of the ship. It fired 24 projectiles, each weighing 65 pounds, in a large elliptical pattern about 270 yards ahead of the ship.
Ahead of the ship. So you can keep the sub on sonar the entire time you're firing. You never actually lose sight of the target.
That's advantage number 1. Advantage number 2 is the fuse. These were contact fuses. They only exploded if they physically hit the submarine.
That is the game changer right there. If you miss, there's no explosion.
None.
So no acoustic turbulence, no blind time. You just reload and fire again immediately.
It turned a guessing game into a rapid-fire assault. The kill probability jumped from 1 in 80 to roughly 1 in 5.
Wow. But, technology is just a tool. You need someone who actually knows how to use it. And this is where the USS England had a secret weapon in its Executive Officer John Williamson.
Yes.
This guy wasn't your typical, blood and guts sailor. He was Cambridge educated.
He was a fascinating character. Williamson approached anti-submarine warfare almost academically. He understood that water isn't just empty space, it's a medium.
Right.
Sound travels at 4,800 feet per second, But that changes based on temperature and salinity. He literally memorized the trigonometry required to lead a target moving in 3 dimensions.
Wait, so he was doing the math in his head while the battle was happening?
He had to. The Hedgehog takes time to fly through the air and sink to the target depth. The sub is moving. The ship is moving. Williamson was calculating the lead angle, where the sub would be, not where it was.
So let's see this in action. May 19th. The first target, I-16. This is the one carrying the rice. The sonar man, David Chun, gets a contact. But it wasn't an instant win. Reading the logs, they actually missed 4 times before they got it right.
It was a proof of concept moment for them. The first attack missed because the sub went deep. Deeper than they thought a sub carrying that much cargo could actually go.
Okay.
The second attack was a hit, but not a kill. By the third and fourth attacks, the Japanese captain was taking hard, evasive maneuvers.
And this is where Williamson's understanding of the environment really comes in. He realizes the sonar pings are returning with the delay that suggests the sub is way down at 325 feet.
Exactly.
And he also realizes the sub is using thermal layers, these patches of cold water, to bend the sound waves and hide.
So Williamson recalculates. He adjusts the firing solution for the deeper depth and the refraction. And the fifth attack is the charm. 4 to 6 projectiles slam into the hull.
Massive underwater explosion.
And then the debris field floats to the surface. Planking, oil,
And bags of rice.
and bags of rice.
Proving the intelligence was right.
It's a tragic confirmation. But that was just the warm-up. Because while the England was dealing with I-16, the code breakers at Pearl Harbor found something much, much bigger.
The patrol line.
The Japanese 7th Submarine Squadron. 7 submarines arranged in a line, waiting to ambush American carriers. The code breakers basically handed the 100-killer group a map with a giant X on it.
And the Americans decided to roll up the line from west to east.
Exactly.
So they know where the trap is, and they're walking right into it, but from the side. Which leads us to kill number 2, the RO-106, on May 22nd. And this one really highlights the Achilles heel of World War II submarines, the battery.
Right. We call them submarines, but in 1944, they were really submersible torpedo boats. They ran on diesel engines on the surface to charge their batteries. When submerged, they had to run on electric motors.
And the RO-106 got caught doing the chores. It was on the surface at night charging up.
The USS George spotted it on radar. The sub crash dived immediately. Now, in the old days, a crash dive usually worked. You get underwater, you disappear. But the England was there.
Because of the math.
Exactly. Williamson calculated the dive rate. How fast can a vessel that size descend? He plotted the intercept course.
They fired the Hedgehog pattern blindly into the dark water where the math said the sub had to be. 3 hits, sub destroyed.
Just brutal efficiency. But the next one, kill number 3, RO-104, is my favorite example of Williamson's mind at work. This wasn't just geometry. This was resource management.
This is the energy budget hunt. I spent a lot of time rereading this section of the source material because it plays out like a scene from a detective novel.
It really does.
The Japanese commander on RO-104 was good. He was throwing everything at them, jamming the sonar with sound impulses, constant random course changes. The England couldn't get a lock.
They couldn't get a firing solution because the sub was moving too erratically. But Williamson realized something. To make those erratic moves, to sprint underwater, requires massive amounts of energy.
Right.
Battery drain isn't linear, it's exponential. If you double your speed, you quadruple your power consumption.
So the sub is burning the candle at both ends.
Williamson looked at the clock. He knew the class of submarine, he knew the battery capacity, and he knew how long they had been sprinting. He effectively did a fuel calculation.
Wow.
He told the bridge he can't keep this up. He has to slow down or he has to surface.
He predicted the exact exhaustion point. He calculated where the sub would have to go to conserve what little power it had left.
He narrowed down the entire ocean to a small box based purely on the laws of thermodynamics. The England moved to that spot, fired, and got 10 to 12 hits. The sub disintegrated.
That's terrifying. You can't outrun the math.
You really can't. And by now, the momentum on the USS England is just unstoppable. The crew is operating like a machine. But on the Japanese side, imagine the terror.
We actually have intelligence reports on this in the stack. The Japanese command started getting frantic messages. They genuinely thought the Americans had developed a super weapon.
And they weren't entirely wrong, but the psychological impact was devastating. Admiral Toyota, the commander-in-chief, eventually realized his patrol line, his trap, had become a graveyard. He ordered the remaining subs to flee.
But the England wasn't done. Kill number 4, RO-116. This one stands out to me because of the sound. On the previous kills, there were these massive water-heaving explosions. But with RO-116, the England fired, and then silence.
Well, not total silence. The sonar operators heard breakup noises, screeching metal, popping rivets.
Oh.
Hedgehog projectiles had cracked the hull, but maybe didn't detonate the sub's magazines. So the crew just listened to the submarine being crushed by the ocean pressure as it sank.
That's a really grim reminder of what's happening down there. Then immediately after, kill number 5, RO-108, this sub tried a different tactic. It stayed shallow and tried to outrun the pursuit.
A fatal mistake.
Yeah.
Speed is useful, but against a destroyer escort that can do 24 knots, you aren't going to win a drag race. The England ran it down and destroyed it swiftly, 5 subs in roughly a week.
But then we get to the finale, the boss battle. RO-105, this wasn't like the others. This wasn't a quick kill.
No, this was the heavyweights entering the ring. RO-105 was commanded by Lieutenant Shinichi Inouye, but crucially, it had Captain Ryanosuke Suzuki on board, a division commander.
To a very veteran crew.
Extremely. They had survived the Aleutians, they had rescued downed aviators, they were the absolute best the Japanese Navy had left.
And the hunt starts on May 29th. It lasts for 25 hours. I can't even begin to imagine the stress of hunting a submarine for a full day and night.
It was an absolute marathon. The USS George and the USS Raby actually took the lead initially. They pounded the area, they used depth charges, they used hedgehogs, but Captain Suzuki was a master.
Yeah, he was using oil slicks to fake his own death, hoping the Americans would see the oil and just leave.
He was blowing air bubbles to create false sonar targets.
He was sitting perfectly still in thermal layers, letting the ships pass right over him. And the George and Raby eventually run out of ammunition. They are completely dry. They literally couldn't fight anymore.
And that moment in the logs is so cinematic. The other ships are empty, frustration is peaking, and Commander Haynes of the George gets on the radio to the England.
Oh, hell. Go ahead, England.
It's basically a resignation. We tried, we failed, you guys are the experts.
And Williamson steps up one last time. He had been tracking the hunt the whole time, plotting the RO-105's movements, even while the other ships were attacking.
He applied that exact same energy budget logic. After 24 hours of evasion, the sub's air had to be foul. The battery's absolutely dead. Suzuki had to make a move.
So Williamson calculated the only possible firing solution left, and at 7:36 in the morning, the England fires one final pattern.
6 to 10 hits. A massive underwater explosion, followed by a heavy shockwave that actually shook the England itself. The RO-105 was gone.
The 7th Submarine Squadron was effectively erased.
Entirely.
So that's 6 submarines. The line is rolled up. But looking beyond the scoreboard, why does this specific event matter so much in the grand scheme of the war?
The strategic impact was immediate. Admiral Toyota was planning Operation Ago, which was the defense of the Marianas Islands. His entire strategy relied on those submarines providing reconnaissance. He desperately needed to know where the U.S. carriers were.
And suddenly his eyes were totally gouged out.
He was flying blind. When the Battle of the Philippine Sea kicked off shortly after what we call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the Japanese fleet was maneuvering based on total guesswork. The USS England had completely removed their intelligence network.
There's also the tactical shift here. It feels like the exact moment naval warfare tipped.
It was the definitive proof that the hunter-killer group concept worked. But more than that, it proved that you couldn't rely on intuition anymore. The sea was no longer a place for hunches. It was a place for calculation.
I want to circle back to one statistic you mentioned in the notes, the casualty disparity. We talked about the hundreds of Japanese sailors lost.
About 400 men, and remember, these weren't just conscripts. Submariners are technical specialists. Losing 400 experienced submariners is a brain drain you simply can't replace in a month or a year.
And on the American side, during this entire 12-day rampage engaging 6 enemy vessels.
0. Not a single casualty, not a scratch on the paint.
That is mind-boggling. It's a complete shutout.
It speaks to the massive disparity in technology and training at that point in the war. You have one side operating with 1930s tactics and equipment, and the other side using what was, for the time, space-age computing and weaponry.
It really was the end of the invisible predator era for the submarine. For decades, the fear was that a sub could be anywhere, completely unseen. Williamson and the England showed that if you have the data, the sub isn't invisible. It's just a variable in an equation.
And if you can solve the equation, you can kill the sub.
The USS England's record still stands to this day. If you have a moment after this deep dive, for everyone listening, I highly recommend looking up the diagram of the hedgehog firing pattern. It's just a grid of dots on a page. But when you realize that grid represents the systematic dismantling of an entire submarine squadron, it's chilling.
It turns the abstract math into a very scary reality.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked about how this marked the end of the invisible predator era, but think about what that implies for modern warfare. If being stealthy just means you haven't been calculated yet, then survival isn't about hiding. It's about making sure your math is better than the algorithm hunting you.
That is a terrifying thought for anyone out on the water today.
It really is. A huge thank you to the source material from WWII Battlefield Memoirs for the detailed breakdown. It's a dense read, but absolutely worth it.
Always good to remember that history is often decided by the people doing the math in the back room.
That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.